All right, today's guest really doesn't need much of an introduction if you follow pro pickleball, but I'll give you one anyway. James Ignatowich is not just a top tier pro on the court, he's also one of the most entertaining personalities in the game, and now he's entering a whole new arena. He just left Selkirk, he's launching his own paddle company, RPM Pickleball, and he's not exactly being subtle about it. This is a guy who's co founding a gear brand while still competing at the highest level and maybe stirring up some things in the process. We're going to talk about what it's like leaving a major sponsor, why he decided to build a company from scratch, what goes into designing a paddle that can actually compete, balancing becoming a CEO and a pro athlete at the same time. But this isn't entirely about promotion. We're not going to do just a puff piece. James has specifically told me he does not want this to feel like a commercial, and I'm going to hold him to that. So we're going to get into the business, the chaos, the rivalries, and yeah, maybe even some of the behind the scenes drama of pro pickleball if he wants to get into it. James, welcome, man. Let's start with this. How weird is it to hear yourself introduced as a CEO?
Oh, it's not that weird. I mean, it's just me and, 4 people, working with us with the company. So I'm like the CEO, but really it's just such a small group. There's definitely levels to what being a CEO can be. I'm probably close to the bottom of that hierarchy.
We talked back in, I think it was June, and your co-founder, Marwan. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you guys grow up together?
Yeah, so it's funny, Marwan and I have been, best friends or close to it since we were 13, 14 years old. He was always my friend who I was like, this guy, he's definitely really smart. It's funny, we had always talked about one day having some sort of company, doing something together. And he's been working at City Investment Bank in New York City for the last, I think, 4 years. And in the beginning of this year, I guess maybe a little under a year ago, I was like, "Hey, Marwan, this is an opportunity that I have, maybe we try to do this."
So what brought you from tennis and then into pickleball?
Yeah, I mean, so I played tennis at Vanderbilt for 2 years, and it's funny, I was on a break, I think it was after my sophomore year, I was on a break and I came back to Florida, and obviously pickleball's always been pretty big in Florida, so I was kinda just looking around and I was always aware of the pickleball courts. I had never played, but tennis was getting a little boring for me. I knew I only had 2 years left and I wasn't really good enough to become a professional tennis player. Obviously, I mean, I was a good player, but that's another level, and so I just kinda wanted to, just out of curiosity, just see what pickleball was like. I wanted to just, get a feel for it. I wasn't somebody that was like, this is gonna be easy. I just wanna go dominate all these pickleball players. Really, I was just curious, and being down here in South Florida, pickleball is super popular. So I think I started with an Onyx Z5, a legendary paddle that everybody knows,
You know,
and,
out of it still.
yeah, and it wasn't something I bought. I didn't buy the Z5, but I think it was my mom's friend maybe that had it and said, "Hey, try this paddle," and I was like, "Okay, it seems decent." And then I went out there and played, and that was back in the day where you really could not shape the ball. I mean, yeah, it's tough to shape the ball, with that paddle, obviously. And so, but that was back when there was no grid on almost eighth art. And so, yeah, there was just I went and I played some doubles, and right off the bat, it was pretty natural for me. I'd say my first week I was probably a 4 or 5 or so, and then eventually after a week or so, I was a pretty strong 5-0, and then I started playing tournaments after 3 months.
So you picked it up pretty quick. Like how far back, like how long have you actually been playing pickleball from the moment you first picked up that Z5?
Yeah, so that was less than 4 years ago. That was in 2021 that was October of 2021. It's funny, I mean, there's a lot of pros that, like, I would say in the top 20, there's a good amount of pros that have been playing for less than 4 years. It's a new sport, it's really not, it's just not that well developed of a game at a professional level. I mean, the top pros are really good players, but I think if you stack it up against, other sports where people have been playing their whole lives and dedicated their entire life to it,
Yeah.
uh, it's a different situation.
You've played obviously at a pretty high level in tennis. And I think there's maybe it's subsiding a little bit, but I imagine 4 years ago that the stigma of like, oh, they're going to play pickleball from tennis and pickleball is not a real sport. Tennis is the real sport. Did you get a lot of that? Do you still get any of that?
It's funny. In the beginning, my friends were kinda just they just thought I was messing around. They didn't think I was that serious about playing, pickleball. It wasn't really something that I was that serious about until I just said, "Okay, I'll enter these pro tournaments a few months in and just see what happens." And back then, pro tournaments were easier. These days, it's a lot tougher. I mean, 5-0 these days is tough. 5-0s are very good now. Back then, it wasn't really like that. So, my friends from tennis kinda thought it was funny in the beginning, and then when they realized that, hey, like, at the top of the pro game, you can make some pretty good money, then they just started copying me, and they're like, "Oh, well, if James can do it, then I can do it." So
Yeah.
then I had a bunch of friends that were trying to play pickleball and, Ryan Fu, for example, Max Freeman, just friends of mine from my childhood that decided to make the jump, and, they're definitely happy that they did it.
I'm fascinated by that comment about, it was easier then. Was it just, and maybe it's just a simple math thing where there just weren't that many people playing pickleball, thus there weren't as many good people as there are today. And maybe it is as simple as that. Was a 4-0 then similar to a 4-0 now, or a 5-0 then similar to a 5-0 now? Or like how's that changed in what you're seeing around the country?
I think it was probably a half level down. I would say, 5-0s back then are like 4-5s right now, for example. I think it's just the law of numbers, right? If there's more people that are playing and also those people that have been playing for longer, then those people are just gonna be better, and it's funny, like, if let's say I remember back when I started and I was playing with 4-0s, 4-5s, they were still kinda learning the game. These days, 4-5s are pretty well-developed players.
Yeah.
So it's just a different situation, and I think in a few years, you're gonna see the same progression. I think the pro play is definitely at a really high level. I don't think it's gonna be a situation where, you know, pro players now are like the 5-0s of the future, but I think it'll kind of, every few years, you might see a half level jump. But it's kinda tough to make a generalization in that sense. I think it'll slow down, because the growth of pickleball eventually has to slow down in some sort of way. I think I saw something online that said it already is slowing down a little, which isn't necessarily a bad sign. I mean, it's still growing. It's just that if you have something that's growing so rapidly, it has to slow down at some point.
Yeah. 4 years ago, uh, how easy was it to get on the pro circuit? And today, absurd question, but how easy is it to get on the pro circuit, or how hard is it to get on the pro circuit?
I mean, 4 years ago, it couldn't have been that hard. I played for 3 months, and then my first ever tournament that I played against Thomas Wilson in the first round of a PPA, and then in the second round of that PPA, I played against H.A. Kohler. I won both matches, so there's not too many professional sports where you can pick it up for 3 months, and then you're playing at a professional level. So, obviously, back then, it was pretty easy. These days, it's tougher, but it's hard to find a lot of professional sports where you'd say that professional sport is easier than pickleball.
Yeah.
I think pickleball is about as easy as it gets at the professional level, because it's a new sport. I mean, there's not if we can find any other sports that are as far along as professional pickleball is in terms of, there are tournaments, there are people that are watching, there are people that are paying attention. If there's any sport that's somewhat similar in that sense, but yet still everybody in the top 20, or at least let's say, half of the players in the top 20 haven't been playing for more than, 4 years, and maybe that sport's as easy as pickleball. But outside of that, I don't really think there's no real comparable. I mean, maybe padel is kind of a new sport also. So, it's when you talk about what sport is easier or less easy, it's not about what looks easy and what doesn't look easy. Like ping pong isn't necessarily as physically demanding as a lot of other sports. And somebody actually had asked me that about a couple months ago, where they said, what's harder to go pro in, ping pong or pickleball? Is the number one ping pong player better at ping pong than the number one pickleball player is at pickleball? It's not even a question. The ping pong player is better. It has to be the case because the ping pong player's been playing his whole life, and the ability that you get at a young age are everything. So it's just physically impossible for Ben Johns to be better at pickleball than, the Olympic gold medalist is, because Ben Johns started when he was 16. So, it's a completely different situation. Not to say that it's easy, but going pro in anything is quite difficult.
I use that word again. How easy or hard is it for, guys at your level to find games to where you're challenged so that you can get better? But I imagine you can only drill so much, and at some point, you gotta either drill with somebody as good, if not better than you, or play with people as good, if not better than you, and I imagine, obviously, that crowd at your level is pretty slim pickings. So how do your peers, um, uh, you know, up their games? And maybe the answer is just as simple as we all live in Boca, or Austin or
That's the answer.
whatever.
That's the answer. So yeah, I mean, if you look at the top, 25 pros, male and female, most of them are in South Florida. It's crazy. I mean, if you look at, for example, the guys in the top five, Ben Johns lives in Boca. Christian Alshon lives in the Boca area. Andre Dayeski lives 20 minutes north of Boca. Federico lives 20 minutes north of Boca. It's just, I mean, obviously I'm there in Boca. It's super disproportionately high, Hayden Patriquin, Gabe Tardio, everybody, and then everyone's on the side. I mean, it's Annalie Waters, Anna Bright, Georgia. So pretty much everybody lives in South Florida. I think that's the only real answer. Because and it's funny because this is something that people ask me about too. So if I had 10 hours to become as good as I could possibly get, let's say, okay, you're saying, James, you have to improve as much as you possibly can over a 10-hour time span. Would I drill or would I play with players that are better than me? I would take, and if I had two options, drill or play with players that are better than me, I would take, all 10 of my hours every single minute and play with players that are better than me.
Really?
Yeah, it's a significantly I mean, the difference between playing with players better than you and drilling is massive, because any weakness that you have is just, it's right in your face and you see it.
I
So
mean,
I
you've always heard, if you want to get better, you got to play people that are better than you. My high school coaches, baseball and whatnot, were always that same mentality. But pickleball, the pros that I would get lessons from here, it's like, oh, you got to drill, 2/3 of the time and play a third of the time. But I've always subscribed to that mentality of, do you want to get better? You got to play against people that are better than you because they're going to expose your vulnerabilities really, really quick, and you're going to know and have more opportunities, I think, to work on something in a more chaotic environment instead of a controlled environment. Because realistically, no one's sitting here, painting the line over and over and over again so I can work on a two-way backhand. But in a game, if you can position yourself and anticipate that, I suppose the trick is trying to find a group of slightly higher level people that will want to play with you.
Yep, which is tough. But I think that's the way to do it. I mean, I drill about half the time. So I'll drill half the time and I'll play games half the time.
I love everybody.
So it depends. Sorry?
I love the videos where you're drilling like literally drilling your partner with shots. What was the one where you were talking about speed ups in the transition zone and you were just ripping shots at this guy? Oh, it was great. And
You just gotta do that for clicks for the
it was
most part.
fun. It's fun. Let me ask you, I'm curious what you see around the country in terms of, if you're doing clinics with 4 O's or 4 5s or 5 O's, how a 4 5 level in Boca relates to a 4 5 level in, I don't know, Atlanta or Chicago or Los Angeles.
4-0 to 5-0 is all muddled to me. I really can't tell. And it's not just me. It's all the pros. Like the pros will all say the same thing.
Do you at all have friends and you play with a 4 5 here and there or a 5 0?
Mm, sometimes I'll play lefty. So I have a lot of fun playing lefty games.
Love that.
Yeah, because it's a real thing. It's fun. Like, so I actually got silver at two like Florida 5-0 Moneyball tournaments. Lefty. So my lefty game is like a strong 5-0. And I love to play lefty. It's fun. Like I can, like the soft stuff's the same. I can counter well with my left hand. I still move well. And yeah, I'm a strong 5-0 with the left. But a lot of pros like to play lefty. Like Ben Johns, for example, he's like a easily a strong 5-0 with the left. Probably at 5-5. And so that's fun for me. But righty, I don't necessarily do it as much because it's just more fun for me to play lefty if I'm going to play with 4 5s because it's more competitive and I enjoy it.
I would like to understand from your point of view. What are you? You're like a 6'8"?
Something like that. I don't even have the tuber app.
Absurdly high. Okay. Okay. But when you play lefty with a 4 5 or a 5 0 tournament, what's what are the things that you see that mean that they're not a 5 5? I've always watched like the Golf Channel, and you talk about, sometimes they had Fred Couples on or Tiger Woods, and they say the biggest difference between a professional and an amateur in this shot is this. Like, do you have maybe a couple of those you could share?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the main thing is just playing the transition zone the right way. So if you look at 5-0 players, we can just talk about 5-0 to pro or maybe 5-0 to 6-0. I'm more comfortable with that range. I have a good feel for that. And obviously there are definitely some factors that we can't even really, generalize across the entire level because there are going to be some 5-5 players that have really good hands and that are just really athletic so they're a 5-5, but they don't get to the kitchen that much, and they're not so good at the soft stuff. So it's not easy to generalize and say, you know, every 5-5 is better at transition than every 5-0. But I would say that the one common theme that you see is just playing transition zone to your strengths. So it's funny because if you look at, a lot of coaches these days will tell you that there's one way to play the transition zone. And when I say transition zone, I mean, the third shot to the fifth shot. It's not so black and white as you should always do this on your third shot. You should always do this on your fifth shot. You should drop to the middle. If you look at players that are 6-0 or even better than that, they play the transition zones to their strengths. So, for example, for me, I like to swing with my two-handed backhand and hit aggressive shots in transition if it's at waist height or above. I'm not just going to drop it every time. But if you have somebody like Colin Johns, for example, he's going to drop it every single time because that's what he's better at. It looks to me like at the 5-0 level, everybody's always trying to do kind of the same thing in transition. When I see some players that have a lot of power that aren't actually aggressive enough in transition. And then I think the other thing too is when you're on defense and when you're reaching on your fifth shot or your seventh shot, I think 6-0s and above are putting those drops to the middle a lot more often than 5-0s and below are. A lot of 5-0s are trying to hit aggressive drops to the corners, and they're trying to get a little creative and fancy with their drops. When in reality, if you look at the pros, outside of Ben Johns, because he's so talented, sometimes he'll do some crazy stuff with his drops. If you look at the pros, we're just trying to get to the kitchen in whichever way is, whatever makes the most sense for me. So, for example, if I'm playing with Colin Johns and I have a fifth where I don't feel super comfortable with it, especially back when I, wasn't playing with a paddle with a really big sweet spot, if I didn't feel comfortable with it, I would just drive it to the middle and then that would funnel the next ball to Colin. If I just hit a low drive to the middle, this side over the net, not too much power, it will funnel the next ball because the next person's going to be hitting up on their volley. It'll funnel it to Colin and then he'll drop and get us in. I'm not trying to hit some heroic drop from behind the baseline if I don't feel comfortable with it. And another thing too that I think is super key is at the highest level, players are driving their thirds off of deep returns a lot more often. I watch 5-O's play, and it's like they're trying to hit these perfect hero drops off of deep returns. I'm driving a deep return. If somebody gets a deep return to me, I'm driving a third almost every single time. It's so much easier to, let's say, I hit a serve to you, you crush the return to me. I drive that third, just low, nothing special with the drive, but just driving it low to the middle. And then you volley it back to me, and then I have an easy fifth shot drop. That's a lot easier than if I try to hit a perfect drop. I mean, even the pros, it's pretty clear if you watch the pros, they're not trying to hit perfect drops off of hard returns because it's difficult and it's just a low percentage shot.
Yeah.
Plus, think about it this way too. If you have a deep return, right, you have all the time in the world to get up to the kitchen and put as much pressure on my drop. If I had a floaty slice drop, you're hitting a deep return that I have to let bounce, obviously, because it's a return. You have all the time to get up there and attack my drop. I'm just going to drive it to them. And for the record, I'm driving it either at the person that's coming in or to the middle. The middle's always a great spot to hit a 70% pace drive, something that's easy to kind of set yourself up for a fifth. Or if you're hitting it at the person coming in, maybe even a 50% pace drive. Maybe it's just a right in between a drop and a drive. But the third shot for the most part is always a setup for the fifth shot.
But if I have an opportunity to drive a fifth in the middle, or, assuming that the other side's all the way up at the kitchen, should I not be driving if they're both up there? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you have an opportunity to drive and really take advantage with the fifth shot, then you should just drive it.
The other side's now made their way up to the kitchen, and you're keeping the pressure on with hitting them hard drives. I don't know, 50, 60, 70, 80% drive as you work your way up to through the transition zone. If you've got the opportunity and they haven't hit down on the ball and forcing you to make like a reset type shot, would you just keep the pressure on, or recommend keeping the pressure on and continuing to drive until, who knows, maybe you get a point that way because they hit their counter into the net? they actually do hit a good counter and you got to reset it. And, now you've made your way up to the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on who you are and what shots you like to hit. I think if it's higher and it's easier, even if they're both at the kitchen, whether it's a fifth shot or a seventh shot that you're hitting, you can drive that ball if you like to drive it, or you can hit an aggressive topspin drop if you want to do that. I wouldn't recommend just slicing, just pushing a drop in if the ball's up here and you have a chance to drive your fifth or your seventh. Either hit an aggressive topspin drop or drive the ball. And one of the things that's another um, good tip is off of fifth shot drives, people are very bad at getting out of the way of balls that are going out. So, random fact, if you're playing me and I drive the third and then you kind of push the fourth and then I have another fifth to drive it, the chances you're going to get out of the way of my fifth shot drive if it's going this far out are very low. And that goes all the way down to the pro level because when you're engaged and you're just ready for a drive and I'm, 6 feet behind the kitchen line, you're not thinking leave the ball. You're just thinking volley it back. So the answer is yeah. If you wanna drive it again, I mean, there's no reason not to. The whole you have to drop the fifth shot is just silly. And obviously, like you mentioned, it's not a binary answer. It's more so how do you feel about it? I mean, Colin Johns would never drive a fifth, but I would.
When I'm on the right side and I speed up down the line, forehand, and then I'm waiting right there for a backhand counter. But when I'm on the left side, are there any patterns that you recognize? And I'm asking this so that it's something that I could just think about and work on myself and, other people watching. Or is there just more to it than that?
No, there's not. I mean, there's a few things I can give you right now. When you're on the left and you speed it up to somebody right at their chest and they counter with one hand, it's going to regress to the middle of the court. So a pattern for everybody to know is that hands battles in general will regress to the middle of the court. And Colin Johns has a really nice video about this on his Instagram. Yeah. So when things get fast, maybe take a step toward the middle, because that's just kind of how it is. So think about it this way. If I'm speeding it up to you and I'm on the left and you're on the right, and then I speed it up to your chest and you're a little late, but you make contact here, your next counter is going to go to my forehand. Your next counter is going to go closer to the middle of the court, right? And if you somehow get it behind me, behind my left side, the chances that you keep it in are pretty low. It's pretty tough to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think of it in, they call it the triangle, right? So in the same way that you're speeding it up from, the right side at the person in front of you to their backhand, it's going to go to the middle. Same thing on the left. Another pattern that you could think of is if somebody has a lot of time. So let's say they're really loading up and they have time to hit a two-handed backhand. So they have time and they're about to crush a two-handed backhand. It's going cross court. It's going to go across your body almost every time. Nobody hits a two-handed backhand like this. Two-handed backhands almost always will go cross court. Uh,
Back into the middle.
yeah, well, I mean, if they're on the right, then they would go to the,
Right.
then I guess they'll just go cross court. I mean, what? One other thing that's interesting too, also another random pattern that helps. If people are reaching from the corner, right? Then that speed up's probably going to go to the middle. So let's say I'm on the left or cross court, but that's not your ball, right? But let's say I'm on the left and I'm reaching for a backhand flick. That's at kind of my left foot area on the left side of the court. If I have to reach for it, it's super tough for me to put that ball down the line, right? I'm also going over the highest part of the net if I go down the line over your right shoulder. More likely, I'm just going to go where there's more court. If I go across your body toward the middle, there's more court and there's a lower net.
Yeah.
Same thing goes if you're on the right side. So if you're on the right side and I'm on the left and you're reaching for a forehand that you're about to speed up, right? You're probably going to go through the middle. It's so tough to get that one behind me unless you do a misdirect thing like that, but that's pretty obvious to read.
Yeah. I'm trying to recognize more patterns so that I can up my own game and therefore put myself in the best position for the next shot. It's just hard to do because you find you have to be in a game like situation. It just I don't ever find it works in practice.
Watch the pros and don't play with people that are 4-0 or below because those patterns don't actually happen. If it's, I'd say the 4 or 5 level and above is where patterns actually take place properly because people are executing the right shots. At 4-0, it's all over the place. So then you kind of forget, you lose what the actual pattern is.
Fair. That's fair. How much of your career right now is athlete versus entrepreneur?
I think it's about 50-50. I mean, I have a lot of focus on the pro game. You have to be, if you're a pro player. It takes a lot of time, practicing 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, foam rolling, stretching, watching some film. Takes a good portion of the day. And then all the other hours of the day, I'm just focused on RPM. which is the paddle company. And then that's the only 2 things that I do. I don't go out, I don't party, unfortunately. You know, I wish I was a little cooler, and I did. My friend's Max Freeman, my info party. I don't. But hopefully this paddle company pays off, and then I'm the one that's left, you know?
Yeah. Was the Selkirk split purely business or was there more behind the scenes?
It was just business. I mean, they helped market me really well. I mean, Selkirk had their strengths and weaknesses, like everyone does. And their biggest strength was just the marketing side of things. They helped push me a lot. They promoted me on all their social channels. They really promoted my podcast. I would have wished that they helped my podcast a little better with some visual representations and some type of things. Instead, I was just doing a Zoom the entire time where I would just, have a monologue and coach. But people still liked it. We were getting 6,000, 7,000 views an episode, and people liked it a lot. But yeah, they pushed me really hard. As far as the making of a pro level paddle, that wasn't their strength. But at the end of the day, they're still doing a really good job as a company. I mean, there's no fault to them. I mean, they're selling a ton of paddles. They've got all the name recognition in the world. So they're clearly doing something right.
I mean, that's okay. Era Power was pretty good. Um, Reminded me a lot of the 11.624 Power series. The boomstick was fun to play. Is fun to play. Love the sound of it. It's a little too heavy for me. 120 plus swing weight. I can't remember what it was. An 8.65 ounces static weight on the wide body is just too much mass for me in stock form. Like you can't add anything to it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. So obviously one of the biggest issues with full foam paddles, probably the main one that I see is just that if you go 16 millimeters, it's tough to keep that under 8.2 ounces or 8.1 ounces stock. It's going to have a pretty high swing weight. So there are ways to maybe fix that, but that's kind of a common problem if you do go for a 16 millimeter full foam paddle. But it's a different type of feel. I think the boomstick had its pros and cons. I mean, I think the boomstick is a good paddle, but it's maybe not a great paddle. I think for me personally, my only issue with it was that the edge guard kept coming off. So I for a week and my edge guard came off.
It came off on mine as well, and, mine developed a seam on the face, but it is a Labs paddle. To be fair, like, Google released a lot of products under the Labs moniker. This is a Selkirk Labs product. It's the market is helping Selkirk learn how to improve the quality, and longevity of that paddle. That's what the Labs moniker is. And so people need to know what they're going into, eyes wide open on that one. I personally liked the way it played. I also really, really like more how some of the best honeycomb polypropylene cores play better. And I can't remember if I was texting with you about this or somebody else where like, hey, why aren't more pros playing full foam core paddles? I think a handful play the carbon true foams. I've saw who did I just see last weekend?
Maybe one or two in the top
Jack
top.
Jack Sock playing the boomstick. They're all playing honeycomb polypropylene. From my own point of view, the amateur here, I like the feel of that better. I like the feedback of those paddles better. The Pro 4s, the 1.624s, this SLK Air Powers. What do you think about full foam core paddles versus traditional honeycomb polypropylene or Gen 3 floating core paddles in the market today?
Well, there's a couple things there. So, one of the things about the Gen 3 style of paddle, is that so what they call is the 2-inch impact location when they do the test. So that's 2 inches from the top of the paddle. That'll actually be the highest point of PB core rating a lot of the times, especially when it's broken in. So what that means is that a paddle that is, Gen 3 style, or for example, we'll take my paddle out of it. We'll just say the Pro 4, the 3S, for example. The paddle, the sweet spot will actually go higher and higher on the paddle, from our testing. And that doesn't necessarily happen from what we've seen yet with full foam paddles. And I think full foam paddles are definitely something that's going to keep increasing. And I think that in some ways it's part of the future. I don't know if the whole future is foam, because I think there's always going to be people who just personally prefer the feel of honeycomb. I know that almost all of the male pros that I've seen personally prefer, and I talked to all of them. The only one in the top 20 that is using a full foam paddle right now is Jay DeVilliers. He's using the carbon true foam. Outside of that, everybody's using some sort of Gen 3 like structure. And one of the things for me personally, which is why that I like the Gen 3 style feel, is because that sweet spot is a little higher. So a lot of times people don't realize this, but when you're hitting flicks or aggressive out of the air shots, you're not going for the geometric center of the paddle. You're actually making contact with the paddle, very, very close to the top of the paddle. So that's one of the things that I think is pretty big. If you're reaching and you're playing singles, you're going to hit the top of the paddle a lot more. Let's say you have a paddle, you have the geometric center of the paddle face, right, which is right in the middle of it. Are you gonna be hitting more aggressive shots a little above that or a little below that? A little above that for sure. You might hit some resets right at the bottom, but near the top of the paddle is where you're gonna hit a lot of your aggressive shots. So we actually did. It's funny. We did a test where we slow motion, saw my serve, and I'm not making contact with most of my serves in the middle of the paddle. I'm actually making contact a little closer to the tip, which is actually a pretty common situation. So that's one of the things. So then the question is, okay, well, if you have a full foam paddle, I'm sure there's a way to engineer it in the future where you can make the sweet spot a little bit higher than what would be the geometric center of the paddle face. But none of the full foam paddles so far that I've tried have had that happen. One interesting thing too that I've just felt personally is, especially on a 16 millimeter paddle, which is what I like. I feel like it's just tough, just like we discussed, balancing the weight of a 16 millimeter paddle with the full foam. But again, I mean, full foam is definitely a big part of the future. It's still in the early stages. The honeycomb paddle, the Gen 3 style of paddle is basically solved. I don't know how much better a honeycomb paddle can get, but if there's one thing for sure, there's a lot of room for improvement with full foam paddles.
But are you one that thinks like full foam core paddles offer just too much of a muted feel for you or your peers to really get into? Like, I'm a feel-based player. I like the way the Alpha Pro Power feels, the 11624 Power, again, the SLK era, the Pro 4s, I don't know, name other Gen 3 paddles. I haven't played yours yet. I just
Like,
like the way they feel. There are some full foam cores that come close to that feeling. I'd say the, Honolulu J2NFs, this Quanta from Rondis that is just came out for sale yesterday. Enhance came out with one. Like, there's very few that don't offer that muted sensation and offer more of that feel based.
me personally, I don't mind a muted feel at all. I mean, I think, in terms of Gen 3 style of paddles, I would say the Pro 4 has maybe the most muted feel, the most foam-like feel, and that's actually my favorite one. And I think it's interesting because there's the question of, okay, well, maybe all of us are just used to honeycomb paddles, especially the pros being so long. So that's just what we're used to. It's funny because Ben Johns actually grew up with fiberglass paddles. And so I asked him what his favorite feeling is, and his favorite feeling is fiberglass. So it's funny. And Ben Johns uses a Pro 4, but he loves fiberglass, right? So it's just, I think it's a very much a, to each their own thing. And I think full foam paddles continue to get more popular, I think people will just get used to what that feeling is. And one way to kind of make it make sense in your head is think about it this way. Think about it if the precedent was all full foam paddles and everybody was using full foam paddles, and then somebody came in and said, "Hey, here's this honeycomb paddle."
Yep.
You would say, "Oh, this feels a little weird." Maybe, and maybe not. But
Yep. No, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. It's just growing up in the Gen 2 era, I guess. It's just everything compares to that. And I suppose the closest feeling in playing paddle to the Gen 3, we'll even go the Yola Pro 4s. Gearbox has got that GX2 power, which is just it feels great. It's interesting that you say, I didn't know that about Ben, in playing a fiberglass. Yeah, jeez. But that makes a lot of sense. That's what you grew up on, and so that's always gonna feel like home, so to speak, and you're always gonna compare everything else to that. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a ton of sense. You were talking about the 16 millimeter full foam cores, and look, I'm really not trying for any of this to be advertisements for other paddle companies, but you're talking about, like, it's really hard for, to make a 16 millimeter full foam core, that's light. And somehow, Rhombus did that with these Quanta paddles that it just went on pre-sale yesterday. They're ridiculously light, in swing weight and static weight, which I find interesting because all the other 16 millimeter, not all of them, well, most of them, 16 millimeter full foam core paddles, they've got high swing weights or higher than average swing weights and static weights. And so I imagine foam is just going to get better, just like we graduated from fiberglass paddles into honeycomb paddles, into Gen 3 honeycomb paddles. And now we're into foam and we've got floating foam cores. And, I imagine it's only going to get better over time.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Justin Barton, the king of the nerds about it.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, oh, he helped me a ton. Like with our paddle, he was just instrumental. I mean, me and him, you know, we I think I spoke to him for probably 20 hours just on how paddles are made. Me and my co-founder, that is, we learned everything we could possibly learn from him. I mean, he's just a complete wealth of knowledge. And that was one of the things that we talked about. There's always going to be a trade-off for like, okay, there's this property about paddles that I think can make the paddle play better, but it increases the weight. And you never want to be above that, 8.1, 8.2 static weight, because then people will see that and say, oh, well, I can't customize this, when obviously, swing weight matters more. But still, it's those two things will often be pretty related. So at the end of the day, I mean, it's going to be a learning process, because I wonder with full foam if so you want as much perimeter weighting as possible. Perimeter weighting is always helpful for sweet spot size. Pretend like you've got a pickleball paddle, and all the weight is directly in the sweet spot. Then if you hit the edge, you're done. It's just going to twist. So you do want a good deal of perimeter weighting, but then if you take a super low density EPP structure in the middle, then it's can potentially be tough to pass PB core. So it's going to be a balancing act, I think, for a lot of people. But that's something that we're doing right now. I think something that paddle companies might not do enough is just going to their supplier and saying, "Hey, how about you guys innovate?" A lot of these suppliers, they have PB core testing machines. They have a way of testing the PB core. They can test the grid. They can test all of these things and simulate it. So then we go and we say, like, for example, I don't know if I should be giving this information out because it might be helpful, but we can just say it. Like I'll reach out to them and say, hey, what are you testing right now? We're gonna pay for all the samples. We'll pay for it. We'll pay for it. We'll pay for it. Just give me as many samples as possible. Test this, test this. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the coolest things about pickleball paddles is that it is an unsolved thing. We're not even close to the best possible pickleball paddle. And the suppliers are hands-on. The suppliers are making all these different types of paddles all the time. So I think I was watching an engineer at Yola talk about this, where he would say, and this was early on in the process. I watched all the other, all the paddle knowledge videos. I watched every pickleball pursuit podcast you could possibly watch. I watched all the John Q podcasts. I've learned everything you could possibly learn. I've really got no life, Matt, to be completely honest. But I watched everything I could possibly watch.
What a dream.
I can tell you anything about any paddle reviewer and their podcast and everything. But so anyway, Chris Olson had one of Yola's engineers on, and one thing that he said was, he said, "Yeah, we'll tell the factory or the supplier, that is, you guys go innovate and just see what you come up with." So we're doing a ton of that right now with full foam. With our Honeycomb, with our Gen 3 paddle, we had an idea, and I think we made something that's more or less as good as a Gen 3 paddle can get, and we've got a bunch of pros that are lined up to use it for free right now, just because they think it plays the best. But full foam, I think it's so far from solved. We're gonna have a ton of just different, like, iterative changes with things, different, fun. I mean, one of the things that the Quanta did, I mean, Pickleball Medicine, he just opened it up. Yeah, they're using like a thermoplastic elastomer at the throat, and it's just there's so many different things. And obviously, I mean, that's probably the best paddle you can get right now for $120. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's sort of like golf, but I don't think that, TaylorMades and the Callaways and the Titleist of the world necessarily play that much around with the internal core makeup of their drivers, for example. And there's so many materials, there's so many different types of foams. And who knows what's after foam? What other material is they're gonna come up with that so in 5 years, we probably won't even be playing with foam anymore or honeycomb. It's gonna be something else that's just been cooked up, which is super exciting to think about. It's evolving so rapidly. Let me ask you, like, what did you learn at Selkirk that you're applying now at RPM?
Just marketing stuff. I think something that they did really well was, so this is interesting. Selkirk used to have a bunch of pros. They had a bunch of pros that played with the paddle. Just make sure I'm center. Yeah, so Selkirk used to have a bunch of pros that played with the paddle, and they didn't really, like it's interesting. They've been kind of moving away from the pros. But Rob Barnes at Selkirk actually said this best on his podcast that the most success they've had in terms of sponsoring a pro was where they just put everything into making a brand behind Tyson McGuffin. Just one pro. Instead of having, 15 different pros where they put a little bit into it, a little bit into it, they decided to put everything into Tyson, make Tyson as big of a deal as possible. And then eventually, I mean, I don't know how many paddles Tyson sold for Selkirk, but I can be sure that Tyson brought a lot of brand awareness to Selkirk.
Yeah.
So that was something that I think was key. Just really, if maybe not having all the pros in the world, because I mean, you've got Yola, for example, with 100 pros, and I mean, for the record, that's totally fine. I mean, there's just that many pros that want to play with the paddle because it's a great paddle.
Yeah.
But I think a key thing is just if you're gonna have a pro, just have a couple, and then you know, put everything behind those pros. But as far as how paddles are made, I didn't really learn anything from them because they weren't, we didn't talk about it. I was always very interested in how paddles were made. I was always really trying to get involved with the process and just learn as much as I could. I wasn't really able to get involved with the process of making any Celtic paddles. I wish I had been given a chance.
What paddle tech out there do you respect, even if it's not what you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny, like I'm such a nerd about paddles and I actually genuinely have a ton of fun doing it. I wasn't like when I first made my paddle, I wasn't planning on making a pickleball paddle company. Really, I was kind of frustrated with the paddle that I was using for the last 3 years with my old company, and I was just kind of curious, like, how do you make a good paddle? What goes into this stuff? I've always been somebody that was super interested in what goes on under the hood. So I just learned everything I possibly could. I watched every podcast. I could tell you anything about any paddle. Me and my co-founder, we opened up 100 paddles. So we've opened up everything just with our bare hands. I mean, I've got carbon fiber splinters still, probably. And anybody that opens up paddles, you get all these carbon fiber splinters. And some of them,
Man.
yeah. So I mean, I out of like in terms of other paddle companies, I could tell you anything about any paddle. I respect a lot about different paddles. Like, I mean, I can give you a few that are interesting. Like in terms of cold press paddles, I've got a ton of respect for what Paddletech's able to do making a cold press paddle. I mean, there's no EVA foam in it. I mean, it's it could snap at the throat, right? If you see Christian Alshon, every time he gets mad, he'll just snap his paddle at the throat. And people are like, wow, is Christian so strong? It's like, no, okay, the Paddletech's cold pressed. It's not that tough. That's what I try to tell people. They're like, what does cold press mean? Okay, whatever, that's fine. But I mean, they're using, the honeycomb that Paddletech is using is obviously very good. They've got the carbon fiber, fiberglass, carbon fiber surface layout,
Yeah.
and they make it work. And I mean, for a cold press paddle, it's incredible. And I was learning everything I possibly could about it. I mean, and I'm just speculating here. I don't know, but there's a good chance they're using some sort of marine grade honeycomb that they actually might have come across by accident, which could explain the thicknesses. The 12.7 and 14.3 millimeter thicknesses. There's two options. Did they come across these thicknesses by accident? They have a marine grade honeycomb that's actually maybe a little bit more springy or a little squishier, that is. Or did they, choose 12.7 and 14.3 on purpose because they thought that was the ideal thickness? Less likely. I actually think that they probably kind of stumbled upon from what I'm guessing, or maybe I know a little bit. They stumbled upon this really high quality honeycomb that's made in the U.S., where maybe the best honeycombs are made, similar to an Engage, and then they made a killer paddle with not a lot of bells and whistles. Right? They've got the tungsten balls that the you know whatever it is that's pretty much it. Um, but I mean, I can go on about all the other paddles. I mean, if
I love talking about the internal makeup of companies that are doing new and interesting things. I have the updated ALW, ESQ series, the GTO from Paddletech, and those all have internal weights. I don't remember if the older generation ALW paddles had internal weighting added to them. And so I guess where I'm getting at is where I find that interesting is, either Paddletech did that first, or maybe it was Holbrook with the Aero series where they put the, internal weighting to try to improve stability. That's interesting. Yola and the original Gen 3 and all the drama with USAP. That's interesting. Carbon in the True Foam Genesis, trying something new in a new space, trying to carve on a new lane. That's interesting.
up with Gen 3 was I think the biggest innovation in pickleball. I mean, everybody created a Gen 3 pickleball paddle. Yola still did it the best. And I mean, they came up with new things too. I mean, they had their Gen 3, then they had the mod, which was kind of the same thing, but then they switched to the 3S. And Yola's done interesting things where they're always making these iterative changes that actually make sense, which I think is cool. I mean, for example, right? So they needed to decrease the power. They stopped crushing the cores from the 3Ss, but then when 3Ss break in, they have pretty much almost as much power as the Gen 3s. I mean, a fully broken in 3S has a ton of power, but it does take time to get there. And then what they did from the 3S to the Pro 4 is, and it's funny because people have said this. They're like, "Oh, the Pro 4 is super similar to the 3S." I think Chris Olsen on his podcast said that the Pro 4 should be called the 3SS because it's kind of like an iterative stab that's pretty similar to the 3S. It's actually not that similar. And I mean, when you play with the two, you might feel like it's the same or similar, but if you actually open them up, there's a ton of changes. I mean, first of all, like the Pro 4 has twice as thick of foam in their Gen 3, around the top 2/3 of the paddle, the diving board construction that is, in comparison to the 3S. But that foam is also, because it's wider, it decreases the power. And everybody thinks, okay, with a Gen 3 paddle, you should have more foam means more power. People just kind of associate foam with power, but a wider, thicker, ring of foam actually will decrease power because it makes it technically it's like a smaller trampoline. And we've experimented with, thinner rings and thicker rings. So thicker rings will have less power. Yeah. And then the Pro 4's got twice as thick of honeycomb cell walls. And people don't talk about honeycomb cell walls enough, but I mean, because they talk about cell size. Everybody's all about cell size, but not about the walls. I can't see. What were you saying?
Correct me if I'm keep me honest here, but what a thicker cell wall is intended to help with longer term durability.
So this is an interesting one, and this is super cool. So, and I was talking to Justin Barton about this, and we're on the same page here in that. So there are two different types of ways to get a response from any sort of trampoline, and a pickleball paddle can kind of qualify as a trampoline. So there's pop power, which is like the paddle tech, and then there's dwell time or rebound power, which is like any Gen 3. So making a thicker cell wall will increase the pop. So let's say this. Let's say we can put it in terms of PB core results. So if you take a paddle tech or an engage, or any of those, the original black ace, where it all comes from pop, so to speak. If you make that paddle harder qualitatively, or if you make that wall behind me harder, the PB core of that wall will go up. And if you increase the thickness of the cell walls of a paddle tech or an engage, the PB core should go up. Again, PB core is kind of unsolved, so there's some, variance, right? But then with a dwell time, rebound style of paddle, a Gen 3 style of paddle like the Pro 4, if you increase something about the paddle that increases the pop, for example, the thickness of the honeycomb cell walls, the PB core result should go down because it'll actually be, think about it this way. If you make a trampoline harder, will it have more propulsion upwards or not? It'll actually have less. A softer trampoline will have a higher PB core, if we want to put it that way. So those are the types of things that are super interesting to me. So yeah, honeycomb cell wall thickness should increase durability. It's obviously going to increase the weight, but it also should increase pop, which in the situation of the Pro 4, where it's such a dwell time heavy paddle, it'll actually decrease the power and the PB core in comparison to a 3S.
Any of your peers that played with the original Gen 3 Yolas, is that something that they enjoyed playing? And the reason I'm asking is because I remember I still have them. Even the higher level players around here that had them struggled immensely to dial them in, and suddenly their punches are going out and everything. It's like they couldn't keep balls in. Did those pros enjoy playing those paddles, or more were they just like, no, you're on Team Yola and whatever, you got to play these?
Well, it depends on which pro was. I mean, for example, Ben Johns and Colin Johns, they stuck with their Gen 2 paddles for quite a while, but then there were some other pros. I know Federico Staxrud and players that maybe wanted a little more power or really could use the power. They loved the Gen 3. But I think what was unanimous among every pro was that this tech was too much. It was too powerful and it was unsafe. But I mean, I played around with the Gen 3. I think a lot of the pros were able to control the Gen 3 or the mod, right? It's very similar tech.
Yeah.
And being able to control those paddles is it's funny because the ability to reset with those paddles, like they had a pretty soft, like it was
Yeah.
obviously like I think resetting and hitting drops and dinks wasn't that hard. It was just countering. Counters would just sail if you were a little late on it, and then also hitting hard serves and hard returns. So the pros all thought it was unsafe. That's for sure. And I think there wasn't a single pro that was complaining and saying, no, these Gen 3s should be allowed because back then it was such a massive jump from Gen 2 to Gen 3. So, but in terms of enjoying playing with it, that's just totally dependent on the player.
I remember I think Zane had a lot of critical thoughts about the original Gen 3s and it being unsafe. I'm just curious of, you being on the other side of that, somebody playing that and driving balls at you, how amplified was the play at your level?
Yeah, the play got a lot faster, very quickly, and I think it benefited some players and it hurt some other players. It was where it was, back when paddles were all Gen 1 paddles, having power, having the ability to finish the point was something of like a special talent. It was tough to put the ball away back in my day when I got started. But now it's easy. So that became a skill that's not really as valued anymore. And it came more down to just consistency, getting to the kitchen every time, things like that. So it was a change in game style. And in a lot of ways in the men's doubles game, the game didn't speed up at all. Because now if you speed it up to somebody with a Gen 3 paddle, the counter is going to come back pretty hard.
Yeah.
So, it didn't actually make the game any faster. And the women's game has always been so fast. I mean, the top women's players are never really dinking the ball. They're speeding up everything. So in terms of how the game play, it didn't change that much at the highest level. Of course, but below that, it was different.
Is there I see, I wonder if there was ever a thought to, um, where, like, those power paddles, let's call them, would be better in the hands of women?
I proposed this idea a while ago. I said, think about how interesting the mixed doubles game would be if women play. If, for example, let's say the PB core limit for men's paddles was
Yeah.
10% less than women's paddles. Mixed doubles would be way more fun. And then the players that, and also the people in the comments that are complaining about men taking too many balls, well, maybe we'll take less balls. If we're hitting with a paddle that's less powerful and the female in front of us has this paddle that's 10% more powerful than ours.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, I think, the best for the game. And lastly, too, if men use paddles that are less powerful at the top of the game will actually speed up.
Yeah.
And that's common knowledge because I can speed up more frequently. Like if I'm playing against JW Johnson now with a Gen 3 paddle, I don't want to speed it up, but he's going to murder the counter. It's dangerous. But if he's playing with a softer paddle, I might take my chances.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, back to RPM. How hard is it to actually make a paddle that feels good? How many iterations did you go through? When did you start this journey? Let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for a short background on it, I touched on this for a little, but I was never really trying to make a paddle company at the start. I was just like I said, kind of frustrated with the equipment that I was using, and I just wanted to see what it would take and just if it was possible for me to make something better. And I learned everything there was to learn. I watched all the podcasts. I hired Justin Barton to teach me privately. I was paying him for his time for the record. He wasn't just teaching me for no reason. I was paying Justin Barton an hourly rate to teach me, which is pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah, and so I did everything I could to kinda learn about paddles. Before I was really fully thinking about making a company, it was more so just I was having a ton of fun with it.
Yeah.
I've always been really interested in gear and really interested in just what makes one paddle better than another as opposed to tennis rackets or golf where everything is pretty much the same, everything's super similar. We've talked about this. Pickleball's so interesting in that everything is, still evolving. So I was just, I spent months at a time. I went through, I think, like in terms of prototypes, we were doing multiple prototypes at a time. So I think I've probably tried, there was probably 40 to 45 paddles that were all not good enough for me because and I've been known for this, just being the pickiest person about my paddles ever. I was always super picky. I wouldn't complain that much. I wasn't like, I was soft about it, but I was very, very, very picky. And so we went through so many different paddles and we tried everything we possibly could. And yeah, I'd say went through about 45 of them. A lot of back and forth. Luckily, we got a factory that's really fast, which is key. Some factories take a lot longer than in other factories. So we got a very fast factory, but also one that works well. We developed a nice little quality control protocol. We have people over there that are managing it, which is super important. And I mean, ultimately, yeah, making it, was it hard? No, because it never felt like work. I didn't model a company to make a company. I didn't make the paddle so that I could make money. I wasn't, this is like, because I was a pro player. I was a top 10 player. I wasn't thinking of a side hustle. I was just doing it for fun. And then eventually our 30th paddle came back so good that other pros were asking if they could use it. I said, well, this isn't even a company. It's just a prototype that I'm messing around with. And then I said, okay, well, if I made a really good paddle and I have, you know, something of name recognition in some sort of sense, and I've got some marketing that I can get behind, I might as well start selling this thing. I mean, I don't know. It makes sense. It's the next logical step. So then that's how it happened. But by the time I decided to make a paddle company, most of the work was more or less done, and it still is so fun. I mean, it's the best decision I've ever made. For my personality, I just love getting super granular. I've got all the energy all day, and like, yeah, it's been so much more fun for me than playing professionally.
That's cool. How long ago did you start this?
Little little under a year ago.
Okay. So it's a fun journey to hear you talk about. So basically, you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to fill a gap. Probably the best position to be in, honestly, because the entrepreneurs that I know, they just trying to solve a problem. Everything else sort of falls in place once you start and you just start working and iterating on that problem. So like I love those type of stories, and I think others will as well. You mentioned 40 or 50 prototypes. Is there anything that happened in the last year that you're like, I don't know if this is for me?
To be honest, there was never that time. And people have asked me this, and you could ask my co-founder. I mean, I'm completely obsessed with it to such a crazy degree, that every day I'm waking up and I'm just thinking about it. And if I ever sit still, I'm like, how do we make a better paddle? And it's one of those things where I think there are a lot of little minor mistakes that are made just due to like a lack of attention to detail that'll happen, whether it's with the supplier or whether with, companies themselves. Some companies are maybe just kind of more focused on marketing, more focused on making a profit, which is fine. I mean, different companies operate in different ways. But for me, it was all about, like one of the things that I love to do was every time I would have a prototype, I would give it to all the other pros and I would say, I only want negative feedback. I only want to know what's wrong with it. And so they would tell me, whatever it is, this is wrong, not enough dwell time.
Right.
Like, okay, so if there's not enough, and it's funny because there's so many different things that you can tune up and change. It's like not all Gen 3 paddles are the same. And just for one example of that, like the 11.624 and the Selkirk Era Power, if you do a dissection of them, they should look pretty similar, right? They look pretty much the same. But there's so many different things that go into the process that can make the paddle different. For example, what temperature are you cooking or curing the foam, right? Or are you heating it up too much? Because everybody, or at least people in the paddle space, know that the actual hardness, the qualitative hardness of that EVA foam ring around the paddle will determine the power to some extent. A softer foam ring will correlate with more trampoline effect and more power. So if you overcook it, the foam can become brittle and then the power can decrease. And so then there's other people that are asking me, well, I got this. And now everybody asks me for about paddle stuff because they know I'm the paddle guy. So all the other pros are like, James, like, my, I won't name a company, but my paddle here doesn't feel the same as the last batch. You want to open up and tell me if there's anything different? It's like, well, it's probably nothing to do with that. I mean, it's probably just maybe the person in China that was making the paddle literally just left in the mold for a little bit too long and overcooked it. There's so many things that could have happened. And or even just, the epoxy that you use, the glue that you use. Like if you use a softer epoxy, it should technically in a lot of ways will have more dwell time. Look, literally so we're experimenting with different glues. I mean, just for fun. So, was there ever a time where I said this is not for me? No, because I didn't have a goal of making a company until well, I was done with most of the hard stuff. But of course I'm not done. I mean, I just got done with a big conversation just about like different my supplier. I don't know if they like me, to be honest, because suppliers really like it if you just say, hey, you know what, we're gonna make like 500 of the exact same thing. I'm like, we need this change, we need this change, we need this change. Like, I'm not even joking. Like, I'll show you the messages there that to a certain point, my co-founder's like, dude, you gotta just settle on one thing. And, but it's
Don't, man. Don't settle. Get it how you want it. I mean, at the end of the day, you're paying them too, right? So
yep.
you should be able to get what you want. And I love the passion there, James. And yeah, don't settle. You get it to where you want it, and then sell the hell out of it. I want to ask you about the strategic vision for RPM in just a second. But first, I want to know who's the player that pisses you off the most, but you respect the hell out of him anyway.
Nobody does. Nobody makes me mad when I play them. I wish I could give you a good answer.
Okay, that's good. I'll take it. I'll take
I don't really, because most of the best athletes, they play fully detached from their emotions. Like I play in a detached state. I don't think when I play that much, and I don't really connect with my emotions. I'm just focused on execution. Um, I don't, yeah, I mean, that's just the truth. Nobody really makes me mad.
I gotta ask you this then. Sorry, one more question on a related topic. Um, when you step onto the court in a pro match at a PPA, how much are nerves and anxiety a factor?
No, I'm nervous before every match. If you're not nervous, then you don't care. But I think what I've gotten good at is being the same amount of nervous for every match. So that's the key, because you're always going to be nervous. There always is going to be some sort of feeling, because that actually is what makes you play better. So I think that I played better when I'm a little nervous, because that's kind of like, so your stress response is mostly just determined by how you actually, tell yourself, about it. So if you say, oh, I'm stressed, like I'm nervous, this is going to make me play worse, then it's going to make you play worse. But if you say, okay, no, this is actually just my brain's way of telling me to be fully activated, this adrenaline is this fight or flight kicking in should make me play better. If you just tell yourself that stress is your best friend, then you'll play better. So I feel it all the time, but I think I do a good job of not making one match bigger than the other match. I treat the first round just like I'll treat the quarterfinals or the semifinals, because that's key. That's key. You have to kind of just have the nerves and just feel them, and then let them keep you focused, and then don't think too much about it.
At the amateur level, the stress and anxiety that I feel is not so much about my game, it's letting my partner down. And I hit a bad shot. I let my partner down. And I haven't gotten over that yet. And it's the main reason why I don't like playing in tournaments, even though they're just local stuff. Not a big deal like what you guys are doing. It's just I don't want to let my partner down. And I don't know how to get over that.
It's good though. It's maybe you just tell yourself that it's good that you care, because if you care about your partner, then that's a sign of a good team pair.
Yeah. All right. I said we were going to go back to RPM. So where does RPM go in 2 or 3 years?
I mean, the goal is just to keep making as many, like so something that I'm planning on doing is making a bunch of different paddles. That's one thing for sure. I'm definitely not planning on, this is not just like a catalog paddle, as they say, where you get something and then you just release it for a whole year. I want to make, 4 or 5 different types of paddles per year. Like that's one of the things that I love about what Rhombus just did with the Quanta, where they just out of nowhere. I mean, 2 weeks ago they just released another full foam paddle, and they just, here's the Quanta for after discount, after codes, it's going to be under. Like that's the type of stuff that I want to do, just because I genuinely have a lot of fun making the paddles. So we're going to do a lot of stuff like that, where we're just coming out with different things. We're letting the market tell us what they think about the paddle, because pickleball is probably the only, right now at least in terms of equipment, it's one of the only ways where you have the leeway to make something, and then you have freedom to ask the market what they think about it. Like for example, the lab situation with Selkirk, the boomstick, okay, the edge guard's coming off. Well, it's, people paid for it because it is something of an experiment. And in a way, all pickleball paddles right now are something of an experiment, because there's no solved pickleball paddle. There's not one. It's not like a tennis racket where they're the exact same. So of course, we're putting a ton of attention to detail into all of our experiments, and I could tell you every single one. But making a lot, innovating a lot, I think that's key for me. Just different types of glue, different types of, I mean, something even as simple as, okay, so if you thermoform a paddle, it's going to have the carbon fiber tube, which has the polyurethane foam all around the paddle. And that's how they, that was actually intended for manufacturing purpose. And it came in Gen 2 paddles, right? So it's funny because the actual thickness of that carbon fiber strip, so not the tube itself, but the actual strip of carbon fiber, that matters too. If that's thicker, it's going to be a less flexible paddle. So if it's, and I'm all about flexion in the throat, I think for thermoform paddles, one of the things that makes paddle techs good or cold press paddles, one of the advantages of a cold press paddle in a way, I mean, obviously I wouldn't use one, but one of the advantages of a cold press paddle is that it'll flex more in the throat. So since it flexes more in the throat, then something that it will do is it should increase the power on a plow through type of shot. If you really load up and you take your time and you hit a hard shot, it should increase the power because it's flexing.
When you say flexing at the throat, so like, so here, right? And are you meaning like,
Well, it's not going to flex that much.
of course,
They will have a little bit of
a little bit, and that creates torque. Therefore, that creates some. It's kind of like, well, I guess you keep me honest here. It's kind of like a driver and a shaft. You're swinging through the ball. There's a little, there's torque if you see those pros in slow motion, and then the head follows through. It's not to that degree, but I think that's what you're talking about. And I didn't realize that, so I'm learning something new here.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think about a cold press paddle, it doesn't, so the main failure mode of a cold press paddle is that it's gonna, it could just break at the throat, right? Because it doesn't have any reinforcement there. So it will flex more. And that's one of the things that the Pro 4 did when they put the foam and this is Justin Barton verified, so I'm not just making stuff up here. But basically when they took a Pro 4 and they had the foam at the throat, that extra foam actually made the honeycomb structure itself thinner at the throat. So since the honeycomb structure was thinner at the throat, it flexed more. So we've got a guy down here named the Pickleball Scientist. He's not named that. He calls himself the Pickleball Scientist, which is kind of funny. And he does all the different like throat stiffness tests, for example. So the throat stiffness of a cold press paddle will be a lot less than a thermoform paddle, but thermoform paddles do have variant throat stiffnesses. And that throat stiffness will come down to the thickness of the honeycomb structure, the thickness of the carbon fiber strip. There's so many different things. And I'm all about, and here's the key thing. I think throat flexion, well, first of all, I'll just say this. Think about it this way. The PB core test doesn't take into account any extra power or torque that you gain from flexion.
Exactly. Yes.
Do a flat paddle. That's how they do it.
Yep.
That's another fun way to innovate and think, well, I could make a paddle that's technically a little more powerful than what the PB core test may indicate because I've done something that circumvented the test.
Yep.
So that's just one of the ways that I think it's pretty cool. So that was one of the things that we did like randomly. But so basically the Pro 4 has the foam around the throat and it makes the honeycomb structure thinner. So the throat stiffness of the Pro 4 is going to be less than a 3S, right? So then we said, okay, we're going to make it so that there's a little more foam down there at the throat, but it's just of a little lower density so that it balances so it's not too heavy. And then we actually have a really low throat stiffness, still a little stiffer than a paddle tech. And if you ever try to hit a paddle tech as hard as you can, this could be a fun thing for viewers at home. If you take a cold press paddle, hit an overhead as hard as you can, and then take a thermoform paddle and see if you can notice how it's got a different amount of flex at the throat.
Okay. I'm definitely going to do that. I want to ask you, like 2 more sections here. I would love to talk about all the technical details of your RPM paddle, surface layers, core, anything and everything that you want to go into. And then maybe we could just do a fun lightning round and then we can wrap this up.
Yeah, or I could even talk more about like other paddles too. Like I could talk about paddles all day.
Let's talk about yours. Like we've talked about other paddles, but let's talk about what's in the RPM paddle and what makes it special.
Yeah, so I've always been a big fan of Yola. What the 3S did to the Pro 4, you take the progression from the 3S to the Pro 4. So the Pro 4 has thicker honeycomb cells. They have the foam at the throat, so there's more flexion at the throat. It's a little heavier, the Pro 4 is, and there's more foam around the edge. So we actually think the Pro 4 left a little power on the table. It's not going to be delisted. People have been saying, is the Pro 4 going to be even, potentially UPA delisted because the UPA brought in this new, ABI standard where it's now getting lower and the power of paddles is dropping. So you won't see, for example, the proton flamingo is no longer on that list. But from our testing, the Pro 4 actually could be a little bit more powerful. So one of the things that we did was we took that EVA foam ring and we just made it a little bit thinner. So from our testing, our paddle should be a little bit more powerful than the Pro 4, but it should feel very similar. Um, the honeycomb cell wall thickness is pretty much the same, but we also have more foam at the throat. So that was the key thing, and I think throat flexion is definitely a big thing as it comes down to just hitting drives and hitting hard shots with the plow through. So not necessarily pop. Like if you're getting a reactionary volley, the flexion at the throat's not going to matter because you're not actually going to activate it. But if you're hitting a big drive, then the flexion at the throat is key. So the Pro 4 has very small insertions of this yellow, what they call the TFP foam. It's a high density EVA foam, super high density EVA foam. It's like 350 kilograms per square inch. And so, for example, the EVA foam ring itself is like 55 kilograms per square inch. So we're talking about a massive discrepancy in density of these two foams. So any of that foam at the throat, it's going to actually, it'll impact the weight if you make it too big. And we wanted to increase that amount of weight. Because one of the things that I felt too with the Pro 4 was if you hit the bottom of the paddle with the 3S2, if you hit the bottom of it, it does feel a little bit dead. And there was somebody, I think it was uh, Lewis actually on Pickleball Pursuit. He was saying that with the boomstick, you feel like if you hit the bottom of the paddle, it'll feel a little bit more solid than the Pro 4. And obviously, you're never really trying to hit the bottom of the paddle. But I think he's actually right in that sense. The Pro 4 has a higher sweet spot, and the 3S also has a really high sweet spot. But if you hit the bottom of it, it's going to feel like, the 3S, the bottom of the 3S is almost useless. There's no foam down there. It's just, nothing's happening. And the 3S is a great paddle for the record. But so we said, okay, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to use more foam at the throat, and it's going to be just of a lower density. And then we're going to find a way to just, okay, we have to make sure the paddle doesn't come in too heavy because you think, okay, well, it's similar to the Pro 4, but it's got more foam at the throat. This sounds like a pretty heavy paddle. Well, one thing that we definitely didn't want to do was use low density honeycombs because we saw what happened with Proton. And this isn't calling out Proton. I mean, Proton made a really good paddle too, but sometimes you use honeycombs that are too low density and then the court is just super fast. And that's what happened with Proton. So we didn't do that either. Sorry?
Dustin, PV Medicine showed, did a scientific test about the densities of that core. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's the way to test it, right? You just take the honeycomb and then you put it into water. And Dustin's great, by the way. I've watched all of his videos. And so anyway, yeah. So we just made the foam at the throat a little bit of a lower density. And then we just made it bigger. So there's just more foam in that area of the paddle. So if you hit the bottom of the paddle, it'll actually make for a nice reset. And that's, we've got a ton of pros that are in line to use it for free. And that's the key indicator. So yeah, all the pros that use, because there's a ton of pros that use Yolas right now that are not actually sponsored by Yola. There are a ton of pros in the top 50 that are using Yolas and they're paying for Yolas or maybe getting free Yolas just because it's the best possible paddle. Okay, we have a bunch of pros in the top 50 that are already committing to using our paddle for free just because they've tried it and they've liked it so much. Just mainly because we made it for pro level play. We designed it with a high sweet spot, but if you hit the bottom of the paddle, you can still reset the ball pretty well because there's some foam down there, but it's not of too high density. The swing weight's not too high. So it's tuned up to be pretty much, a Gen 3 style of paddle that would be most designed for really high level play, people that like to be aggressive, but also like that sweet, forgiving feel that you'll get with a Pro 4. So, ultimately, yeah, I mean, people are liking it a lot. Oh, sorry. I can't see you sometimes. That's my,
Oh, you're good. You're good. You're good. What is the cell size of the honeycomb core?
8 millimeters. Same as Pro.
How many surface layers?
3.
Did you do are any of the layers on a bias, any fiberglass layers, or just 3, straight up 90-degree carbon fiber layers?
So that's fun too. Yeah, the layers on the bottom. So we actually didn't. We just have 3 layers, 0 by 90 by 0. We kept it simple. So that's the same thing that you're going to find with a Pro 4. So we have 3 layers of carbon fiber that are all, it's the exact same as the Pro 4, 0 and 90, 0. But layers on a bias is something that we're doing pretty soon, which I actually think is a very cool idea from Franklin. I don't know if Franklin is the one that did it first, but obviously, so Franklin has what they call the C45. So it's, I don't know if you want to pull it up. So Franklin has 4 layers, 0 by 45 by 90, and then 135, right? And so it's 4 layers, and it'll do some interesting things. But having I'll leave it at that. I would say having a bias in the layers instead of just going the traditional 0 by 90 by 0 can do some things that are fun. And I think there's potential there with full foam. I think some of the drawbacks of full foam, for example, the sweet spot not being biased high enough, right? Well, if you bias those directional layers, you can tune it up so that the sweet spot will go upward. And that's another thing that we're experimenting with full pump. So yeah, shout out to Franklin because that was their idea. That wasn't my idea, but I am going to come out with something similar. So
It looks sharp, man. So you got a 14 and a 16 millimeter. It looks like it's a 16.5 by 7.5. What do you got, a 575 handle on that thing?
we have so we have the elongated shape and the wide body shape.
Well, you do have a wide body. I'm not seeing a site right.
Oh, because it's pre-order. Because so random fact, but we passed USAP for the 16 millimeter elongated and the 14 millimeter elongated.
Okay.
Barely failed for our wide body, so we made a small change, a little more foam. Yeah, but yeah, so basically the wide bodies are going to be approved in about a couple weeks, but the elongateds are approved right now. But we're going to also have a hybrid. I mean, I want to do all the shapes. Shout out to Ronbis for having 5 different shapes.
Well, or you could go the Honolulu pickleball route and have like 32 different, J2 or NF style paddles. Like, yeah, Ronvis, this thing is incredible. The Quanta, $99.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah, I don't know how they're making any money with this. Unless they're getting these for like $5 or $10 landed. But
oh, they can't be. They can't be.
yeah,
I'd assume they're probably getting it $30 landed. It's tough to get less than that. I mean, but at the end of the day, it plays really well, and it plays a lot like a boomstick, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. When are you guys gonna have the RPM Friction Pros? Like, when are they gonna start shipping?
So we've been shipping locally already. We just got our order of 500 that just came in yesterday, so we're shipping them right now. Locally, we're killing it just because everybody that's tried it has had great things to say about it, and we're super grateful about that. That's the most fun part, like just watching people play with it and really enjoy it has been cool. So locally, we're crushing it without marketing. We're not really doing any marketing yet, but now we're starting to. I mean, I'm on this podcast, so I'm doing some marketing now.
It looks fantastic. Sorry, I didn't hear your answer to the question on the RPM Friction Pro 14 and 16 millimeter. Is that a 5.75 inch handle?
No, does it say
5.5? I didn't click on the details. I suppose I could just do that.
Just make sure it doesn't say that because we had some issues. We had like
oh no, it's 5.5. It's 5.5. Okay, standard 4.25 grip circumference. Cool. Okay.
Because we had some, because our website, I'm an expert at creating paddles, but not at making websites, to be completely honest.
Or I can help you with that stuff if you need some help on the side there. So swing weight looks like the average is around 111 to 114. Twist weight on the 16 around a 6.4, and twist weight on the 14 is right around a 6.2. So these are like Pro 4, right in the ballpark numbers here, which is awesome. And this is going to be USAP certified. I can't imagine you guys are going down like the UPAA stuff right now.
Just for blackout.
Just for blackout. Okay.
And that's the thing too, like those numbers are super similar to the Pro 4, but and I love Yola, but my only issue with the Pro 4 is the ones that they give to consumers have no grit. And that's just, I mean, they'll tell you that themselves. So we made something that's going to play really well, but we're not skimping out on grit. Like we wanted to make sure we're right up on that bar. Cause I think grit's helpful. I mean, people that say that grit doesn't really, cause there are people that say that it's all about dwell time to create spin, that grit is not super important. I think grit's really important, especially on dinks where you're not actually activating dwell time.
Yeah. I don't know how much grit matters when you're driving a topspin driving a ball. Like, I think this is anecdotal. It's completely subjective.
Right.
Well, makes more sense there. But when you're doing a 2E backhand, roll dink or whatever, yeah, you need grit.
How much dwell are you activating on a
like nothing? I would think nothing.
100%. You're totally right.
All right, lightning round. You good with that? Or you want to talk more about the RPM?
Oh, I mean, I think I talked about pretty much everything. Random fact too, shout out to Ronbis because they had a guy, their best guy, I think, this guy that's working for us now, Michael Halim. We stole him from Ronbis, and he's the best. So shout out to Michael Halim because me and him have just been nerding out on paddles. He came from Ronbis to us, and without him, I don't know what we would be. And he says great things about Ronbis, for the record. But without him, I don't know where we would be.
Like, very few paddle companies are difficult. Look, from my vantage in being a content creator, and trying to build relationships with them. I could probably count on one hand out of the 40 or 50 that I have relationships with that have just been, really, really difficult. Like most of the time they're just great people, small business
Outside of me?
and I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I said outside of me.
I'll tell you. Oh, no, not at all. This has been great. Okay, here we go. What's the worst paddle you've ever played with?
Ooh, the Z5.
I knew.
All right, gotta be the Onyx Z5.
Player you most like to use an RPM.
Christian Alshon.
Um,
I think he played great. I think the RPM complements his game really well, but he's expensive.
yeah, I bet. I bet. What's the dumbest comment someone's made about your game online?
Probably. Oh, well, I mean, this is just a general comment where people will say that you shouldn't use a two-handed backhand. They'll say, no, you got to use a one-handed backhand. Two-handed backhands are not necessary. There have been even some people that have commented and say, you need to use two hands for your backhand. You're not strong enough to use a one-handed backhand. Like, okay, I mean, I could use a one-handed backhand, but I choose to use two because it's better.
I imagine being on the other side of your 200 backhand. Yeah, whatever. I probably wouldn't want to be there.
Two hands is better than one. 100%.
Most underrated player on the tour right now.
Colin Johns.
One paddle feature you think is total BS.
That's a good question. I don't want to. I mean, it's funny because everybody's got their own. I can tell you where I'm not a personal fan. I mean,
Good.
it's tough to say. It's tough to say because I don't want to. I hate the feel of fiberglass for some reason, and I get that fiberglass has a use case, and I know. I mean, Ben Johns loves fiberglass, but for me, and I tried to like it.
I mean, just as a layer, so like a CFC layup, you prefer? No, I don't want
any fiberglass in there for my personal ones, and we're gonna make paddles with fiberglass. Don't get me wrong, because people love fiberglass. It can, you activate a fiberglass layer with a big serve. You can hit a lot of power, but for me, I like carbon fiber only. I like 3 layers of carbon fiber. But that's just my personal thing.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, last question. On-court trash talk. Who's the best at it?
Matt Wright. Gotta be Matt Wright. Oh, well, I mean, obviously back in the day, there was a guy named Jeff Warnick who was legendary, but he's too old now, I think. He's out of the game. I don't know what happened to him, so it's got to be Matt Wright. Matt Wright's just hilarious. Matt Wright is absolutely hilarious. I mean, I played doubles with him in 2024 a bunch of times. And I remember one key moment was against Tyler Leung and his partner at the PPA Masters in 2024. And I don't know Matt and Tyler's relationship. It didn't seem like they were the best of friends at the time. Just from maybe they were competing against each other. Who knows where that comes from? But Matt and I are rolling. Matt and I are up, had to be 11-3, 9-3 against Tyler, and I think it might have been Todd Fought, and there are these nice like high school age, maybe it's tough to tell, but these girls that were cheering for Tyler, I guess maybe they were personal friends of Tyler. They knew him, and it was all in good fun. They were just supporting Tyler in a normal way. And we're up 11-3, 9-3, and Matt Wright is, after hitting shots, he's looking at the girls. He's telling them to sit down, shut up, or something like that. I forget what he was saying, but Matt is known to get energy from just innocent crowd members. I don't know if he does that anymore, but he loves to be the bad guy. Matt does, and it's awesome because it takes courage, and he just doesn't care. He doesn't care, and that's yeah. So that's a random one. I mean, I've got a bunch of stuff. I just don't want to sell them out. I don't want to say some stuff that are separate.
I don't want to put you in that position here.
I wish I could.
Okay. James, thanks, man. I love talking about this stuff. I appreciate you doing this. I appreciate you being real and taking the time to ramble with me on pickleball stuff, topics, strategy, your new company, your new paddle, nerding out on paddles. Like I enjoy this stuff. It was a blast to sit down with and chat with you. And again, I appreciate your time coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me. I had a great time. Hopefully you can edit the boring stuff that I said and maybe make this a good podcast for your listeners. We'll see. But thank you for watching too. So
it'll be good. All right. That's a wrap.